Debbie Anderson from
Can you
Ohio.
use the mic, please?
Debbie Anderson from Ohio. I do live in a wind farm. I have 86 turbines around me. I can tell you that it's a lot worse when I've got 5 around my house than just 1. But I would like to know, has there been a study of people that already have health issues such as migraines, heart conditions, seizures, anything like that, to say that shadow flicker, noise, any of the stress levels increases their current conditions before the wind turbines are there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, one that I really worried about myself. And in fact, that was one of the key goals I had in trying to do the jargon, the free text mining of the adverse event reports to look for that. Unfortunately, well, to put it bluntly, I ran out of money to keep pursuing that research. I hope to get back to it. So that actually is a question that I personally was pursuing. You definitely see hints of it in many of the reports, and that's why I was interested in it. Now, some of the systematic studies have gathered information like that, but unfortunately, they're really too small to parse things like that, right? So to figure out if to have a systematic study that looked at how different the outcome is for people with a history of migraines compared to those without. You'd want to study 100 people who were exposed to that history of migraines, compare them to 100 people who didn't, some numbers in that order. Well, finding 100 people to study with a history of migraines who are near a wind farm is unfortunately quite difficult. So, that said, I did work on one case on behalf of someone who had exactly this history, and I did make the argument that based on everything we know, it sure seems like someone who has a history of migraines, of light flicker mediated health problems, which this individual did, that of all the people that you might guess are going to have a bigger problem, she's it. But unfortunately, I don't know whether that means that her risk is not the 5% that I keep talking about, but rather 20%, or whether her risk is 80%, and she's really doomed. So I wish I could give a better answer.
Any other person got a question or comment? Yes.
Dr. Phillips,
Name, please.
Steve Robley, Franklin Grove. You described the process, adverse event reporting and case crossover studies, and if I understood, they are somewhat less formalized than systematic studies that we have and we would like to have a lot more of. But it seems like a lot of the data in the wind turbine studies is this adverse events reporting and case crossover studies. How is that the same, or how is that different than what's normally done in scientific research?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and the answer is it depends on what kind of scientific research, because typically when we think of health research, we're looking at questions, and I keep coming back to cancer as the example, but there are many such examples. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, compared to smoking, good nutrition, all sorts of other things that are very difficult to study. And so we've created in epidemiology these complicated study methods that let us figure out, of all the hundreds of things that somebody did in their life, how do we sort these out from each other to figure out which one of them elevated their risk of cancer. And to do that, we have these study designs that have names like case control study, not to be confused with the case crossover, or cohort studies, or in some cases we have what are called clinical trials, where you actually can perform experiments on people and change their behavior, although that doesn't work very often for exposures like this. Those are the studies that you typically see, because that's the only thing that lets us get at some of these much more subtle causal relationships that are out there. But necessity shouldn't be confused with virtue, if you will. It's necessary to do those particular types of studies that you might have heard of, that more often show up in a journal because why? Because it took somebody $500,000 in 5 years to do them. So by gosh, they're going to get it out there into a journal. It's very different. It's a very different type of experience because it's necessary to do that, to answer these more subtle questions. It turns out the more you look at this one, the less subtle it gets. And that's why I was pointing out how this particular evidence, while it would be useless for trying to figure out what causes cancer, is extremely compelling in these particular cases. And so, some of these end up in more typical studies. That is, someone collects a group of these together systematically in something that might be called a case study, or case series rather, or something that might be called a data mining exercise, like I had underway before I ran out of budget again. And those are more typical study designs, but in some sense the beauty of this situation from a scientific perspective is we don't need those. This is sort of a perfect case of citizen science where people can't tell us what caused their cancer. They have no idea. There's just no useful information in people's views of what caused their cancer. But people can see what's causing the particular stress disorders to go on and off. So it doesn't look like what we're used to because we have an opportunity to get information that wouldn't normally be available. Just because it's needed in other cases, turns out doesn't mean that it's needed here.
Yes.
Roseanne Parlow Creek. I was just, while you were talking, I was wondering, the 5% that have the serious side effects, is there any evidence to show that young children whose brains are still developing, they are affected more? And then even, I also was wondering, in these adverse event reports that you receive, do more of them come from adults complaining about their own effects, or are they parents complaining about their children's problems?
More of them are about adults complaining about their own effects, but I think that is often a demographic issue. That is, these tend to be in areas where the population skews older and there just aren't children in the home. A lot of them are about parents identifying effects in their children. Typically these reports have multiple family members experiencing something. And exactly what to make of that, I don't know. So, there aren't too many that come to mind where somebody talks about just something their child was experiencing that they didn't experience themselves. And that's sort of understandable, because unless you're experiencing this yourself, you might attribute your child's problems to, typical children's problems. But if you're feeling it yourself and you can really see it turn on and off, something that the child might not be so clearly perceptive of, you're more likely to report it. Now, in terms of greater impact, we know from other areas of the science about noise and health, where the impact of being near a highway, a train track, something that we have a lot more studies about, just because that's where the politics, where they actually study things. We do know that kids have a lot bigger problems and that they can have greater ramifications. That is, whereas an adult might get over these problems just by walking away, the kid might have some residual problem. We don't have anything like evidence of that from wind turbines because, of course, we don't have the follow-up that we need. Maybe someday we'll be able to go back and find those kids 10 years later and see if they have a persistent, measurable problem. We don't have that yet, but there's kind of reason to fear it based on other evidence about noise.
Any other?
Ryan,
Good.
Ryan. So that, what about employees that work at wind farms? If there's if you can see a crossover effect where they come and they go, and has you ever done any study? Not necessarily.
Well, they can't get near it. We're gonna.
Typically, it's close to people living there.
There are very few cases where anybody reports, you know, the problems starting, you know, sort of the same afternoon that the turbines came online. You know, it's a cumulative effect. Sometimes it's merely a matter of days that somebody reports starting to have problems. Typically, it's, you know, a matter of, you know, a week or two or a month. That, you know, that tends to support my hypothesis about the cumulative stress reaction. You know, one bad night, you know, one bad night of, you know, neighbors playing music loudly because they're having a big party doesn't create a health problem, even though it might ruin your sleep. A week of that, and you start to have health problems. Compare that to going into work for the day. I mean, some people, you know, seek out loud parties. We enjoy some of these very same stimuli, loud noises, deep thumping bass. People go out of their way to enjoy that for a few hours. We wouldn't necessarily expect somebody working for the day and then going home at night to somewhere else to have anything similar to the pattern of results that we see for people who are sleeping there. Indeed, we have some reports of the I abandoned my home subset, where somebody continued to work their land, for example, or work at the workshop that was on their property, but got an apartment in town away from the turbines to sleep, and were able to get over the problem. So, you know, a lot of it seems to have to do with this constancy and with the sleep effects. And that matches what we know about stress reactions. You know, everything from noise to heat. If you're hot all the time, it creates, you know, life-threatening stress reactions. But if you can cool off for an hour a day, you're actually a lot better off. So I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I probably wouldn't have even predicted that people working at these sites would have had any measurable problems based on our hypotheses about why the problems happen.
You keep coming back to sleep.
What's that?
You keep coming back to the sleep.
Okay, well,
that's when the damage is being done.
That I think, again, two aspects of it, and I don't want to put one ahead of the other because we simply don't know. The relentlessness of it is a problem. So having to be near it for 12 or 15, or depending on your lifestyle, 24 hours a day matters a lot. And that's a constant across stress-mediated health problems. Not surprising at all. The other is if a lot of the effects happen during sleep, either a direct effect on sleep, these sleep disorders, or just that's when it's most distressing, then we wouldn't be too surprised about that. I mean, another thing we know from the noise and health literature is workers react differently to things. And we know this about everything. And what you're willing to sort of, what you're able to put up with as part of your job, knowing that this is what you do. It's something you're, you know, happy and proud to be doing. You put up with it for 8 hours and then you go home. We can, you know, experience things that if we had to experience them all the time would be quite damaging. We can experience them for a little while. Additionally, there might be some self-selection issues. That is, anybody who takes one of these jobs and finds that it's causing problems quits. So, and, you know, of course, homeowners can't do that quite so easily.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Tom Stephan from Paw. I've been blessed with 10 windmills. My neighbors here also have 10 around them. There's been a study at the University of Chicago, the Children's Hospital there, with the flickers. It causes dramatic epilepsy. You cannot escape the flickers from going in the house. There's also been a study of the electromagnetic field going underneath. There's been a case in Sterling where those 14-year-old girls got killed with electricity hitting the field, and there was no water, it was just wet. There's problems with it. From my understanding with the council here, there's have been no oversight from the civil engineer, the zoning person, even go out there to even investigate anything. I feel real bad. I can't even open my windows in the summer because the wind noise is so bad. Now, what effect am I going to have? I've been there